When I was 20 something years old, I went to Ashland, Oregon for a summer. I was a summer missionary. And boy, Ashland, Oregon has never been the same since missionary Maury showed up in town. This was a summer where I was supposed to go in, and my church was trying to start some new ministries in Ashland, and I was sent out to do some preparation work and investigate the town. It was a wonderful summer, but the main reason it was a wonderful summer is that I got to stay with this 70-year-old woman in this she had this historic home. She had a clock that was owned by Francis Scott Key. Um, well, I remember the day I showed up and first met her. You entered through the back porch of this big old farmhouse, and I entered through, and she was standing there in the kitchen pointing a blunderbuss, like an ancient blunderbuss, at me. I mean, like seriously looking at me. And I walked in the door and she said, "In this house, we just have one rule. I make all the rules." And she just busted up laughing. And she put the gun down, and and showed me my room and all of that. Uh, I would sit down to breakfast and I didn't at the time. I really didn't like tomatoes, but she would stick some tomatoes on my plate, and she'd say, "Look, I'm just going to put a few of these tomatoes over here in the corner, and if you don't like them, you can just eat them anyway." And she'd laugh, and I'd eat them. And anyway, she was just so much fun. I was worked with the youth group in the church I was at, and she would join us sometimes, and we play this game called Fruit Basket Turnover, where running around in a circle. And I'm telling you, none of the kids were more exuberant than her. She was just such an amazing lady, and I enjoyed that summer so much because she was just so full of joy and play. After I left, finished college, went down to seminary, I was desperate to get married because, who wants to hire a single pastor, right? In my denomination, that was just kind of unheard of. So I had this girl in Boston that I was pursuing, and, I'd convinced myself that she was the one, and I was going to go marry her, and I'd set it up to move to Boston. And one evening she called. She was in tears and explained to me that she'd met another man, and she was so sorry, but it was over with us. And that just, oh, that was the end of my world. My whole life shattered. I mean, that she was part of the going to be the answer to my story. And so I went around in sackcloth and ashes, almost literally, for several days. I didn't eat. I was just really depressed that this had broken. And the semester ended, and I was driving back home to where I lived in Washington. And on the way, I was gonna stop by and see Mrs. Swift and spend the night there. And so I popped in to see her, and I sat down, and she sat in this chair, it's kind of set back and listening to me. And I was telling her my tale of heartache and betrayal. And she started sort of like convulsing, sort of just like, like she couldn't control. I was like, man, is she all right? But I'm telling her, and then, I gave her this and we did that. And I can't believe that she, betrayed me. And I was telling her this sad tale of my world shattering, and she just continues. Mrs. Swift just was continuing to like get more and more agitated, and finally she just broke into this laugh. I don't know, it wasn't like a sneering or a degrading laugh, but she just started laughing. And I don't mean a little laugh. She just knee slapping, had to take her glasses off and wipe her eyes kind of laugh. And I looked at her like, well, that has never had that kind of a reaction to my sad story before. But she went on to say, she said, "Oh, you young people. My granddaughter was telling me her story the other day about breaking up with her boyfriend. I couldn't get through that one either." And at the time, I was like, what? It was sort of shocking But as I reflected on it, I mean, it was exactly the medicine I needed. Because here's what was happening. I was locked in to my story. Humans, our greatest, superpower is that we tell stories. Our Achilles heel is that we believe them. Well, I was all in on my story of marrying this girl and how my life was going to play out. And when that story shattered, well, that was the end of my world. Well, here I was talking to a woman who had buried two husbands, lived through the Great Depression, the Second World War. She'd seen some things come and go, and she understood the nature, I think, of just life and the way that our stories break down. And she had this sort of joyous perspective. Well, she never would have described it this way, but in the way I look at it today, I would say Mrs. Swift had made the existential shift. She understood that her life was an expression of story, and that these stories, they matter, but they're not like the foundation of life. And so her ability to just kind of like, in a loving way, laugh. And I should say that after she laughed, she sat down and said, well, now tell me more about it. And she comforted me, and she, she showed real compassion for my situation. But it was from a perspective, she just wouldn't buy into my whole framework that the whole world had fallen apart. She just, she couldn't do it. And I think, she had this bigger picture. So as I look at the people in my life, and some of them are young, some of them are quite old, who come to me now with their broken tales of broken, shattered story, whatever they are. And, it might be a relationship that's broken. It might be, all the things that life throws our way, financial setbacks, illnesses, all those kinds of things. Just like in a demeaning way, laugh at people, but there's this joyful ability to sort of step back and say, okay, but human existence is more than any one story. Like, so how shall we look at this story? How can this story be an expression of your life now that we've removed it as the foundation of your life? And so I'm trying to take a lesson from Mrs. Swift, but I'm also, as I, go through my life and bump into people, I'm trying to be like Mrs. Swift, not to laugh at people, but just to understand that, the thing that's so tragic that is not necessarily just that somebody's story has broken, but the whole way they're viewing life is that their story is the whole, the whole thing, the all of life, and every story shatters. As I, these three specters tear them down. We don't know the whole story. The true story is shattered by Inaros. The happy ending of every story is ruined by Vanitas. And this idea that we're going to wind up in some perfect family where everybody is loving and knows your name, Rapax, wipes that out. So the specters, this is what I've been experiencing and really been facing up to over the years, is that these stories, every story breaks. But it doesn't mean that story doesn't matter. It just means that the story, instead of being the foundation of my life now, is an expression of my life. And it gives me that freedom to step back from the story, like Mrs. Swift, and to just kind of bring that joy into every situation, even difficult situations. She made a huge impact on me, and I hope me telling my little story of bumping into her has made a little bit of an impact on you today.